For 1,700 years, the most explosive words of Jesus were labeled heresy, banned by imperial decree, and hidden in desert caves. They weren't merely left out of the Bible, they were actively erased. But what if the greatest miracles Jesus performed weren't the healings and water walking you've read about, but powerful encoded lessons about your own forgotten divine potential? Why did the early church fear a Jesus who taught that the kingdom of God is within you more than they feared the Roman Empire? And what price have you paid? What part of your spiritual awakening have you missed by never hearing these forbidden verses? Tonight, we are not just telling history, we are opening the sealed scrolls to reveal a Jesus who was not just a preacher, but a master of mysteries, and we'll uncover the one forbidden revelation they tried hardest to bury. Stay with me. Let's dive into the forbidden truth now. What if the greatest turning point in Christian history wasn't a spiritual consensus, but a political coup? We've been carefully taught that the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was an effort to unify the faith, a gathering of sincere bishops. But the hidden truth is far more dramatic and unsettling. It was primarily about power, structure, and the aggressive censorship of texts that threatened the established order. Imagine the scene: a great hall, heavy with the scent of incense and the unspoken weight of political maneuvering. Emperor Constantine, a brilliant but ruthless pragmatist, presided not as a spiritual guide, but as a ruler obsessed with imperial stability. He needed a single standardized religion to unify his fractured dominion. That singular structure required a Bible that enforced obedience to external authority, one that funneled the overwhelming power of the divine through the narrow gate of the church. This demand initiated the Great Purging, an act of theological violence that sentenced countless sacred writings to destruction. Think of the chilling image: scholars, huddled in their monasteries, watching vast libraries of scrolls, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, declared poisonous heresy and condemned to the pyre by imperial decree. These texts were not burned because they lacked spiritual depth, they were burned because they were too dangerous. They spoke of direct access to the divine, suggesting that salvation was a realization achieved through inner wisdom, gnosis, not a transaction performed by a priest or granted after death. The consolidating church desperately needed followers who would seek deliverance through its doors, not through their own uncontrolled inner awakening. I find it impossible to study this period without feeling the profound aching loss of spiritual self-reliance that was stripped from the Western world. This censorship did more than just remove pages from the Bible, it installed a hierarchy built on fear and dependency. When you suppress the texts that clearly proclaim an immanent God dwelling within every individual soul, you successfully create a population reliant on external structures for their sense of worth and salvation. Yet, the very texts that spoke of Jesus' most powerful forbidden miracles, miracles not as mere events, but as encoded instructions for activating our inner divine potential, were too explosive to be entirely annihilated. Some were secreted away, surviving for millennia, buried in the unforgiving sands of Egypt, waiting patiently for seekers like us to unearth their truths. So, what did these suppressed scrolls actually say? And how does a hidden collection of forbidden sayings fundamentally change everything you thought you knew about the true power of Jesus and, most importantly, yourself? If the official Gospels are the public sermon, then the Gospel of Thomas is the whispered instruction, the secret code. Imagine the awe, the confusion, when a document hidden since the 4th century was pulled from the sands of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, in 1945, offering 114 sayings of Jesus that were fundamentally different from everything else. This scroll wasn't narrative, it was a list of paradoxes, designed to shatter your standard perception of God. The most revolutionary phrase, the one that guaranteed its exclusion from the official canon, is this: the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Stop and feel the weight of those words. For centuries, the faithful were taught that the kingdom was a promised land, a celestial reward granted after death, mediated by the church. This Gnostic concept violently opposed that structure. If the kingdom is already within, then salvation is not a transaction performed by a priest, It is a realization performed by the self. I believe this single saying contains the truest essence of forbidden knowledge. It transforms Jesus from a redeemer of sin into a guide for spiritual awakening. The political cost of this truth was immense. If people realized they held the divine spark directly, they would stop kneeling to any human authority. Consider the difference. The canonical Gospels teach, follow the rules, confess to the priest, and you might see the kingdom. The Gospel of Thomas teaches, know yourself, and the kingdom is revealed. This shifts the entire burden of proof from an external institution to an internal exploration. When you read the Thomas sayings, there's an immediate, chilling resonance, as if you found the missing pieces of a puzzle you never knew you were solving. This resonance, this direct, unmediated connection to truth, is exactly what the consolidating church was trying to suppress. They feared what an empowered, self-realized follower could do to their hierarchy. But this philosophy of the within extends beyond just knowledge. It changes the very definition of a miracle. What if the famous miracles were not just historical events, but living parables, coded instructions on how to use that inner kingdom to transform the external world? Next, we dive into the most profound symbolic miracle, which reveals the true alchemy of the soul, a secret so elegant and simple, it was too dangerous to be taught openly. We all know the story of Cana, Jesus turning water into wine to save a wedding party from embarrassment. But what if that miracle wasn't just a simple party trick, but a profound cosmic lesson, a coded instruction on how to transform the base material of your soul into something divine? This is the miracle read not literally, but mystically, and the forbidden interpretation reveals the true power that was deliberately hidden from the masses for millennia. Think about the profound symbolism at play. Water represents the natural, fluid, yet often undefined state of human consciousness, the ordinary, raw material of your existence, easily influenced and often chaotic. Wine, however, in almost every sacred tradition, symbolizes transformation, the elevation of the spirit, illumination, or the blood of a new covenant. When Jesus turned water into wine, was he merely demonstrating power over chemistry? Mystics and Gnostic scholars strongly suggest he was demonstrating the alchemy of the soul, the precise process by which the enlightened being consciously transforms the mundane experience, water, into the extraordinary spiritual experience, wine. I believe this perspective is absolutely essential because it reframes the miracle from a unique, unreachable event performed by one man to a potential state achievable by all human beings who possess the inner spark of the Logos. Why was this deeper, alchemical understanding suppressed? The answer lies in control. A faithful believer waits for God to act upon them. A mystical seeker acts with the divine potential already within them. If the common believer realized they had the innate power to turn their water, their daily worries, their base fears, their ordinary lives, into wine, divine purpose, joy, and manifestation, they would no longer need the church to promise them a better future. This transformation teaching directly undermined the very control mechanism of external salvation, empowering the individual to realize their own inner Christ nature. The institutional church could not risk the spread of such radical self-empowerment. It needed dependence, not mastery. When I reflect on this mystical interpretation, I feel a powerful shift, a sense that the Bible suddenly becomes less a book of history and more a spiritual guidebook. The true miracle of Cana wasn't the wine. It was the lesson that we, too, carry the transformative flame, the capacity to bring divine order to earthly chaos. This is why those early texts, like the Gospel of Philip, which speaks heavily of spiritual union and the mysteries of light, were so fiercely condemned. They detailed the how, too, of this transformation. The true Gnostic was the one who could turn their inner water into wine. The power of transformation is immense, but the threat to the patriarchal structure was even greater when that power was associated with a woman. The person Jesus entrusted with his most profound secrets, the key to the inner working of the Logos, was not Peter or John. It was Mary Magdalene. Next, we uncover the forbidden miracle of the divine feminine and how its suppression was perhaps the most damaging act of censorship of all. The official narrative gives us Mary Magdalene as a reformed sinner, a footnote to the apostles. But the forbidden Gospels, the scrolls they tried to burn, reveal her as something else entirely, the apostle to the apostles, the one disciple who understood Jesus' hidden teachings more profoundly than anyone else. She was the inheritor of the most sacred knowledge, and her suppression is perhaps the greatest tragedy of the early church's quest for patriarchal control. This is the forbidden miracle of the divine feminine. The Gospel of Mary portrays her not as a marginal figure, but as one who received secret visions and instructions directly from the resurrected Christ. In these texts, she confronts Peter and the other male disciples, who doubt her authority, claiming they cannot believe the Savior would speak secretly to a woman. This scene is a historical echo, a perfect dramatic representation of the institutional struggle taking place. The male-dominated structure of the burgeoning church could not tolerate the idea of a woman as the primary bearer of divine mysteries. They needed a hierarchy where power flowed from male leaders down, not through the unmediated vision of an enlightened woman. I believe her suppression was a spiritual catastrophe. By minimizing Mary Magdalene, the church didn't just sideline a woman, they sidelined the very essence of Gnostic wisdom, the intuitive, direct, and non-linear path to God. They replaced the gentle, profound mystery of inner awakening, which Mary represented, with the strict, dogmatic structure of external obedience, which Peter often symbolized. Her existence as a master teacher was a direct threat, because it suggested that spiritual authority was not bound by gender, status, or title. It was universal, accessible through the heart and gnosis. Imagine the implications if her gospel had been accepted into the canon. It would have radically shifted the spiritual balance, affirming that both the masculine, structure, law, and the feminine, intuition, wisdom, were essential to understanding Christ's message. Instead, the flame of the divine feminine was intentionally dimmed, and her teachings about the ascent of the soul and liberation from the rulers of illusion were buried. This censorship was a profound act of spiritual fear. A person who has been entrusted with the deepest secrets and who has mastered their inner spiritual journey cannot be controlled by earthly empires or fear of death. Next, we move to the ultimate challenge to authority, a forbidden teaching that proves resurrection is not a promise for the future, but a miracle available to you right now. The resurrection of Lazarus is one of the most powerful stories in the canonical Bible, a stark demonstration of power over death itself. But what if the greatest miracle of resurrection wasn't a historical event to be celebrated in the past, but a spiritual state to be achieved in the present? The suppressed teachings redefine this concept, turning the story of Lazarus from a distant wonder into an urgent call to action for your own soul. The established church taught, and still teaches, that resurrection is a future event, a miraculous physical renewal that occurs after death, contingent on faith and obedience. However, the Gospel of Philip offers a radical, forbidden counter-narrative. It contains a striking, definitive statement. Those who say they will die first and then rise are in error. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, when they die, they will receive nothing. Ponder the immense threat contained in that sentence. It obliterates the foundation of deferred hope and external reward. I believe this Gnostic understanding of resurrection as a spiritual awakening that must occur now is the true, profound meaning of the Lazarus story. Jesus wasn't merely bringing a man back to physical life. He was demonstrating that the soul can rise above the tomb of ignorance, conformity, and spiritual blindness while still in this world. The tomb represents despair, dogma, and the fear of fully embracing one's divine potential. If you can rise from that tomb now, you have achieved the ultimate form of spiritual freedom. This was revolutionary, and consequently, it was suppressed. A soul that has already tasted eternal life and experienced this present resurrection has no fear of tyrants, no fear of empires, and no fear of the death that rulers use to enforce control. They cannot be held hostage by the promise of salvation because they have already realized it. This is why the institutional authorities worked so hard to literalize the story of Lazarus, to keep the miracle outside the believer. instead of revealing the key for the miracle within them. It is an invitation to every one of us to shed our despair and rise from our own self-made spiritual tombs. If Jesus' miracles weren't just random acts of divine power, but powerful demonstrations of universal law, what would that mean for your understanding of reality? We must move beyond the literal interpretation of miracles and see them for what they truly were, keys to the cosmic code. This is the forbidden wisdom of Jesus as the Logos, a concept so vast it transcends the narrow boundaries of religion. The Gospel of John, even in the canonical version, contains the explosive prologue, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The word is Logos, a concept derived from Greek philosophy and mystical Judaism, understood as the divine principle, the cosmic blueprint that shapes and sustains the entire universe. If Jesus embodied the Logos, then his miracles were not interruptions of nature, but profound demonstrations of nature's deepest, hidden truth. His acts were the law of creation made visible. Think about the miracle of calming the storm. This isn't just a powerful spectacle. When Jesus commanded the winds and the waves, he was revealing to his disciples, and to us, that the chaos of the external world is subject to the order of awakened consciousness. Mystically, this shows that the storms in your own life, fear, doubt, anxiety, can be silenced by the realization of the divine presence within you. This is a teaching of mastery, the ultimate self-empowerment. This mystical understanding of Jesus as the Logos was fiercely opposed by the Church. Why? Because the cosmic, universal Jesus, a figure aligned with hidden knowledge found in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Gnostic texts, breaks down boundaries. The Church needed a Jesus who belonged only to them, whose power could only be accessed through their rituals. The Gnostic view, supported by scholars like Elaine Pagels, suggested Jesus was a universal teacher of wisdom, offering a path accessible to all seekers through inner knowledge, regardless of creed or temple. I find that accepting Jesus as the Logos transforms the entire spiritual journey. It means the miracles are not past history. They are living codes that invite you to align your own consciousness with the creative principle of the universe. When you understand the Logos, you understand the very fabric of existence. But there is one final, ultimate secret, a revelation so terrifying to the established powers that they systematically eradicated every trace of it from history. It is the forbidden teaching that explains why you can do the works of Jesus, and even greater ones. We have traveled through the hidden corridors of history, from the Council of Nicaea's censorship to the cosmic secrets of the Logos. But now we arrive at the final, most profound revelation, the single teaching that the institutional Church feared more than any other. It is the forbidden miracle that explains why they worked so hard to erase every other truth we have discussed. This is the ultimate, explosive statement about your own nature. The forbidden truth is this: Jesus was not meant to be the unique Son of God, but rather the living pattern for the divine potential dwelling within all humanity. The canonical Gospel of John, despite centuries of editing, still contains the most radical, explosive statement: "You will do the works I have been doing, and even greater works than these." This single sentence, left deliberately vague in the mainstream, is clarified and amplified in the suppressed Gnostic texts. The Gospel of Thomas records him saying, "He who drinks from my mouth will become as I am, and I will become he." This is not a message of worshipping a distant figure. This is a radical declaration of empowerment, a blueprint for self-divinization. Imagine the implications this held in the ancient world, and even today. If every soul could truly awaken to this same divine power, if they could realize their own co-creator status, then the entire framework of authority collapses. The Church needed a Jesus who was incomparable, whose power was exclusive and only accessible through their mediation. The Gnostic Jesus, however, was a universal teacher who showed the way for all humanity to realize their Christ nature. I believe the suppression of this teaching created the deepest void in Western spirituality. They feared what the world would look like if people no longer feared death, no longer succumbed to tyrants, and no longer needed external systems of control. An awakened soul cannot be enslaved. This is why the texts were banned. This is why the miracles were literalized and minimized. They wanted you to admire the work of one man in the past, rather than realize the transformative power latent within your own spirit right now. This is the ultimate miracle, the realization that the divine presence is not confined to a distant heaven, not monopolized by a priesthood, but dwelling, waiting to be kindled into flame within you. This realization is not a promise for the future, it is the true resurrection available today. We began this journey by looking at fragmented history, but we end with a total, unfragmented truth about your soul. You have ventured through the deepest corridors of censorship, from the political control of Nicaea to the suppression of Mary Magdalene, and you've deciphered the alchemy of the soul hidden in the most famous miracles. You now understand that the greatest miracle of Jesus wasn't an act you simply admire, but a pattern you are meant to follow. The Church tried to erase the truth that the divine spark lives within you, fearing the power of a fully awakened human. You have successfully reclaimed that forbidden truth. What you have received tonight is not just historical knowledge, it is spiritual ammunition. You now possess the key to the present resurrection, the power to rise from your own tombs of despair and self-doubt right now. This knowledge separates those who merely listen to sermons from those who actively live the miracle. The choice is simple. Will you carry this sacred, forbidden truth and allow it to ignite your own potential? Or will you allow the ancient censorship to win by remaining silent? If this message resonated, if you felt that familiar, chilling recognition that a page had been torn from your story, then share this video so that others may awaken too. Comment below and tell us which forbidden truth resonates most deeply with your own inner search. By doing so, you join the lineage of the seekers who refuse to let the fire be extinguished. Subscribe to this channel now, because if you think the early church was only concerned with the Gospel of Thomas, you haven't heard the truth about the Book of Enoch, the secrets they kept about the Watchers, and the cosmic warfare that shaped your world. The ultimate miracle is not a mystery of the past, it is the awakening of your soul in the present. The journey is not over,